This is Thursday before the big Memorial Day weekend. I've got a big barbecue planned. I'm sure you do too, and your mind is probably a million miles away from China and slave labor camps. But I have to ask you again, I'm that kind of guy. Are you now a good German too? I did this yesterday. I'm going to do it again. And Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi is waiting on line 10 live. She seems to be the only living Congresswoman in the House. She seems to be the only legislator in America who understands that at the end of the road, we have to answer to God. And we have a conscience. If we have a conscience, as this good lady does, we have to answer for that conscience. And at the end of this program, when you find out definitively as to whether there are slave labor camps in China, as Harry Wu contends, how many people are in them, whether human organs are harvested, we have videotape, by the way, that was smuggled out. If you can still sit there and say you didn't know and therefore you didn't say anything, then you are no better than the Germans who said we didn't know there were death camps in our neighborhood. Now, this goes for all stripes, conservative, liberal, libertarian, agnostic, atheistic, religious. It doesn't matter. What matters is that we ask the questions of our media. Why are you not holding Clinton's feet to the fire on human rights abuses in China? Congresswoman Pelosi, welcome to the Savage Nation.
Hi, how are you, Michael? Nice to be with you again.
Well, we disagree on many things, but we always agree on this terrible, terrible issue, Congresswoman. And I have to ask you, because many people don't believe me, how do we know for sure that there are slave labor camps in China?
Well, any doubts that anyone has had should be allayed by the fact that in the Wall Street Journal today, Adidas is saying, or maybe it was yesterday's paper, that they concede that some soccer balls were likely made by Chinese prisoners.
Oh, my God, I didn't see that.
It was in yesterday, actually. So, I mean, not that we needed that verification. It's interesting about slave labor camps. Most people did not know that there were gulags in the Soviet Union until they read about it, obviously in the Sakharov's writing, etc. But
and, of course, Solzhenitsyn's Gulag Archipelago.
Yes, Gulag Archipelago. But the Soviets always did a very good job of keeping that undercover, and the Chinese government is the same. It does an excellent job of keeping its dark side hidden, and this dark side includes it is quite conclusive.
But Congresswoman Pelosi, here's the question. I know they exist because Harry Wu was in one for, 16 years?
19 years.
19. He was on this program. I think he's a great American. In fact, I had him on the show last July 4th. And he's a wonderful, wonderful human rights activist. Mm-hmm. And he wouldn't make this up. And, of course, he's posted his own website, which literally shows every camp in China. But here's the question that disturbs me. Where has our fourth estate gone on this? Congresswoman, I haven't seen in the entire trip to China not one newspaper person sending out a report from China saying, but there was no mention of the slave labor camps. But Mr. Clinton failed to bring up the issue of the slave. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think that they covered the summit, and that these issues were not brought up by the American side. I think that we almost should have a parallel visit to China, which says that when the president was in Xi'an, the ancient capital, the beautiful archaeological dig of the clay soldiers, the terracotta soldiers, that he, if you had driven just a few miles away from there, would have seen not a prison labor camp, but a factory where 20,000 Chinese laborers are paid $60 a month to make the tail section of the Boeing 737 production that was previously carried on in Wichita, Kansas. So they did not show the whole picture of China. When they talked about wanted to see the Great Wall of China, they could talk about the Great Wall of China's barriers to products made in America. Most products made in America do not have any access to the Chinese market, and President Clinton's term alone, the trade deficit will be $250 billion by the end of this year. And, of course, we know when the president was reviewing the troops in Tiananmen Square, they are the same troops that brutally occupy Tibet, which repress dissent in China, and which proliferate weapons of mass destruction throughout the world.
Nancy, you're a liberal Democrat and in good standing, and obviously you're friendly with Senator Feinstein and Senator Boxer, and I'm not going to ask you to take a position against them. But how can they, in good faith, I know they have other things on their mind, but nevertheless, They certainly have a public that follows them. They claim to be interested in human rights and civil rights and all sorts of issues to do with human dignity. How come they're silent on this issue?
Well, I believe they come by their views honestly, but you're going to have to talk to them about it.
It's impossible. They won't talk to us.
Well, I think Senator Feinstein's views are very clear, that she believes that we shouldn't be criticizing China, but being actively engaged there. And I agree. We should have active engagement, but it should be honest, effective, and sustainable of our values, of our economy, of international security. And what I'm very afraid of in this summit is that, as you know, the Chinese dealt the president several blows before he even got off the ground from Air Force One, got off the ground in the U.S. by saying, no, we're not going to do anything to lower tariffs. No, we're not going to sign any agreement to stop proliferating weapons of mass destruction. And no, we're not going to sign at this time the Convention on Civil and Political Rights of the UN.
But Nancy Pelosi, look, I don't mean to interrupt you. I want to have a spirited dialogue because we're on the same wavelength here. I have to ask you this again. You are a skilled politician. You've been around a long time. You grew up in a political family back east. When in history has the Fourth Estate failed to be a critic of any administration like this? I haven't seen it.
I think that the spinning by the administration and indeed also by the Chinese regime has been very, very effective. We must never underestimate the public relations apparatus of the White House. Somebody said, "Oh, they blew the critics out of the water." Well, who are we? The lowly us versus the presidential spinmeisters. But I do believe that they have been in some ways seduced by this trip to China, and it's unfortunate. But I think that they will take a second look, and I'm optimistic that they will. After the bloom is off the rose of this trip, and people are home, and we celebrate the 4th of July, and we reflect upon the Founding Fathers' idealism about freedom and human rights for all people, that we'll begin to judge this trip by its results.
Nancy Pelosi, if you keep up this rhetoric, you're liable to convert me into a liberal. Be careful.
Well,
now,
the thing is that, I have been willing to be the bad cop to everybody's good cop, even His Holiness the Dalai Lama and some of the dissidents and the rest, because they can only say what they can say, and without destroying their dialogue.
But why are you so vehement on this issue? I've got to find out more about it because, we learned from this trip. Remember, Nixon went there quite a while ago. He was the first American president to go to China. And this trip reminds me that Karl Marx did get one thing right. History happens twice. First as tragedy and again as farce. And I think that we're seeing almost the equivalent between Clinton and Zhang as Molotov and von Ribbentrop in reincarnation. It's another great moment in the history of cynicism, and yet you seem to be the least cynical politician on the planet. And I hope you'll stay with us a bit more to elucidate your views and tell us personally why you feel so strongly. Because, Nancy Pelosi, you don't have to be doing this. You don't have to be putting yourself out on a limb. I don't know why you're doing it. I'd like to find out, and I hope you'll share that with us. Listeners, you're listening to KSFO Radio. This is Michael Savage. We are very lucky today because Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi has pulled herself away from buying food for the barbecue on Saturday and whatever else I'm doing this day and tomorrow for my 70-person barbecue. And I'm serious. She's taking the time out to be with you, and I hope you'll take the time out to listen to her. We'll be back. And my favorite liberal is now with us. Nancy Pelosi, welcome back.
Hi, how are you, Michael?
If this gets around that you're on my show and I have...
It's the third time, I think.
And I had drinks with Willie Brown twice now.
Oh, my God.
I don't know what's going to happen next, but, if Senator McCain can be friendly with Senator Lieberman, I think it's okay for you and I to talk.
And Senator Feingold, an even more liberal Democrat. McCain Feingold.
By the way, the Weekly Standard says that McCain is running for president and he's the media's favorite Republican. Did you read that story?
I haven't seen that, no, but I wouldn't be surprised. With the tobacco legislation and the campaign finance reform, he has been center stage for a while now.
I like him a great deal. I really respect the man, and he'll probably be on the show with us next week. But getting back to China, why are you so personal? Because you seem to be personally animated by this story. I mean, it's not just an issue like tobacco. It's personal with you, isn't it?
Well, I do have a very serious concern about the prisoners. And as I may have said, that one of my concerns about this summit is that President Clinton and President Chiang are attempting to relegate Tiananmen Square massacre as an episode in the past rather than a condition in the present that persists as long as the dissidents are still in prison. So 9 years ago, many of us were committed to getting those prisoners freed, and as long as they're in prison, we will be relentless in our advocacy for it. I guess it all started, in answer to your question about is it personal, it all started when I was a teenager and read the Diary of Anne Frank and immediately went to my parents and said, did you know that this was all going on at that time? And I've been asking that question ever since. It's been a long time since I've been a teenager, so I've been asking the question for 40 years. Did everybody know that this was happening? And we say things like never again, and we say nunca más in terms of the atrocities in Latin America in the last several decades. But in fact, when repression continues right before our eyes and we do have leverage to stop it, there seems to be what is called the cruel apathy that sets in. And I believe that where we do have leverage, we should use it to help free prisoners who are arrested for their religious or political conviction. And I guess it all started with my reading the Diary of Anne Frank. But I also think that around the time of the 4th of July, we're reminded of the greatness of our country and that we are different, and that just because other countries do not take the initiative that we should not lead. The risk of it all, Michael, is though it sounds very sanctimonious and self-righteous, but that's a risk you have to take, I guess.
Well, what about this? The Taiwan issue was to me the only outcome that shocked me. In other words, all the others I figured Clinton had already more or less worked out the fact that none of this would change on the trip. It was a good public relations stunt. Fine, politicians do that. But I didn't expect him to sell Taiwan down the river. And frankly, when it happened, I was stunned by another happening. The headline should have read, banner headlines across America, Clinton abandons Taiwan. Don't you think so?
I think so. I think that the president's statement was absolutely astounding. Also, the fact that he criticized Japan while on Chinese soil.
It's unbelievable to me.
That was very undiplomatic of the president when he was being exquisitely diplomatic in his characterization of the Chinese government's behavior. But on the subject of Taiwan, the three no's, no independence, one China, no two Chinas, and no membership of Taiwan in any international organizations, saying that so bluntly and openly in China, I think was a real slap at Taiwan. I did see one cartoon which had the White House, and then the welcome mat outside the front door was the Taiwan flag, the flag of Taiwan.
Oh my God!
That was pretty telling. But this deliberate ambiguity that we have been engaged in on Taiwan to not strengthen one's hand or the other of each side, China or Taiwan, had been effective. If the president was making this declaration about the three no's, he should have added the fourth no, and no use of force on the part of the Chinese against Taiwan.
Well, the Taiwanese people
weaken the Taiwan's hand at the bargaining table.
I don't think that the Taiwanese people are simply going to lay down should there be a military confrontation, nor do most analysts who I've spoken with. But that isn't the issue, is it? The issue is that their ally, America, has suddenly abandoned them publicly and unequivocally. I don't know how that could happen without a roar coming from the Congress.
I think that you will see. I think when people come back, Congress is out, so this is an advantage to the president because everyone is all dispersed. When Congress comes back in session and people take a second look at this visit and see what President Clinton has wrought on this trip, regardless of whether you agree with his policy on China or his going on what the proper results of this trip should have been, I don't think anyone was prepared for this slap at Taiwan. And, I'm not actively involved in the Taiwan-China issue, although I'm quite familiar with it. And as I say, I was stunned by what President Clinton had to say in China about Taiwan. We have always advocated peaceful unification, and I believe that the president's statement, especially about Taiwan not being able to join any international organizations, will embolden the advocates for independence in Taiwan and indeed heighten the tension rather than diminish it.
Nancy Pelosi will be with us for about 10 more minutes, at which point, when we return from these commercial breaks, we're going to take two callers. We'll be right back on KSFO. Well, back in the 70s, we had Nixon and Mao Zedong, which was history. It's now followed by Clinton and Zhang, which is only a sequel. It's sort of a bit like seeing The Third Man remade as a musical comedy. But there isn't too much comedy in the slave labor camps, as Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi will tell you. And Congresswoman, welcome back to the Savage Nation.
Hi, Michael. Nice to be back with you.
And, this is... I want to just step back from our dialogue for a moment to say it takes two wings of a bird to fly. I've said that, a right wing and a left wing.
Mm-hmm.
And I respect the other side when it has integrity, just as they respect the right wing when it's not the lunatic fringe. And the integrity seems to be missing. Nancy Pelosi, what other voices in Congress are being raised about the slave labor camps other than yours?
Well, I believe that there's a large coalition of Democrats and Republicans who are aware of, can document, and are speaking out against the slave labor camps. We have been ignored largely because it's not economically beneficial to certain companies in America for us to speak up. But I don't want to give the impression that I think that the people who do not support what we're doing are not without their own principles as well. They just have a disagreement in tactic. But unfortunately, for example, this trip can sometimes do more harm than good if it anoints the regime.
Yes, but it's legitimizing a totalitarian regime.
And also relegating Tiananmen Square massacre to the past, as I mentioned before. So it's a series of missed opportunities and unfortunately can do more harm than good, because now people in the U.S. will think, well, I said President Clinton talked enough about human rights and freedom in China to satisfy the U.S. domestic consumption.
But nothing changed.
To change anything in China. Ironically, the cartoonists have gotten it right. There have been so many cartoons the last few days which have shown the hypocrisy of some of these statements. But let's hope for the best. The president has said human rights is now important in our relationship. Before, it was relegated to a minor item. So now let's see. He's extended a hand of friendship to the Chinese regime. Let's see how they respond to that, and then we can measure the success of this summit.
Well, when Reagan went to the Soviet Union, he said, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." He took a chance with the Soviet Union. Why couldn't President Nixon have said, "Mr. Zhang, open up the slave labor camps"? I mean, would the world have come to an end?
Well, it's in fact, it would have been most appropriate. In fact, the president said, remove your trade barriers. The regime said no. But it would have been great if President Clinton would say, take down your trade barriers, open your markets, and open your prisons for those who are there as prisoners of conscience. How wonderful that would have been. Open your markets. Okay, that's what we're all about, the U.S., I guess. But then open your prison doors and let the prisoners free who are there because of religious or political conviction.
Well, you remind me of something, and I'm not a very religious man, but the biblical statement that what good does it profit a man if he gaineth the world and loses his soul? If ever there was an apt example of it, I mean, we're gaining the world in economics. We're doing a wonderful job of that, but we seem to be losing our soul as Americans, and that's what you and I are talking about. Maybe we're from another generation. We've got time for one call. Todd in the car. Incidentally, if you want to speak with me, Michael Savage, about the China issue after Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi leaves us in a few moments, you can call me right now. Todd in the car is the lucky caller.
Thanks, Michael.
Yes.
And it's an honor to talk to you, a leader in our nation. You stated publicly this morning on the letter division station that you're a big supporter of Clinton's. I've just got to ask and take you to task on this. You've got him abandoning your side of the issue on China. He's abandoned the homosexuals here in the Bay Area. He's been all of but proven to be a womanizer. And issue after issue, this guy has let you guys down. And I just got to ask you, where's your credibility, and how can you guys stand up and support this guy when he's let us down so many times? I just don't understand how you can support him and publicly state that you still support this guy after all of these issues.
Well, I do believe that President Clinton's presidency is worth the trouble. I think he's done many good, and I appreciate, Todd, your very informed question. I believe he's worth the trouble. From my perspective, I think he's done many good things in terms of the economy, in terms of the budget, in terms of education, in terms of protecting the environment. So there are many issues, and I'm not a single-issue person. Just because I disagree with somebody on an issue doesn't mean that I abandon them. But I do think that we must insist on integrity as an issue. And I think that if I ever were to depart from somebody because I disagreed on an issue, it would be on the integrity issue. If you're telling the truth about an issue, whatever your position is, I have to respect your view, as I hope you would respect mine.
Well, as I say, this is another great moment in the history of cynicism. He's not the first president to have elected himself to that position. But Nancy Pelosi, on this issue, you are a voice, but you're not in the wilderness. And I certainly appreciate your continuous, thumping and banging and screaming about it, because otherwise it would be lost. And the voices of those people in those slave labor camps are not going to be forgotten so long as we have a radio program.
I'm so glad to hear that. Thanks, Michael.
And Nancy Pelosi in Congress, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Happy 4th of July.
Yeah, we're going to have fun, but we can't set off fireworks, can we?
That's wonderful. Bye-bye.
Bye. Yeah, I wish I could set off fireworks. That would be fun. I want to have some M80s. I want to have some sparklers. When I was a kid, I ran around with sparklers on July 4th. I ran and ran and ran till my legs didn't move, all into the night. I didn't seem to set the farm on fire.